Welcome to this new episode of the Chorus podcast. Today we're going to be talking about regenerative travel, corporate social responsibility, design of travel experiences, but also leadership in governance, from the local to the national level, through the challenges and accomplishment of a destination management company, or a DMC in the tourism jargon. Suyin Lee, good afternoon. Welcome to the Chorus podcast. Would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Benoit. My name is Suyin Lee. I'm the Managing Director of Discova, a global destination management company. Discova was born out of the merger of two destination management companies, Buffalo Tours in Asia and Olympus Tours in Mexico and the Caribbean. About over 4 years ago, they were both acquired by the Flight Centre Travel Group, which is a large global travel company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So part of that merger required a rebranding of the two companies as we continue to acquire more companies and to grow our footprint across the world. So I'm based in Singapore, where I've been for the last 11 years. Home for me is Brisbane, Australia, where I have lived since I was 10 years old. My family migrated there from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where I was born. So thank you for having me today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Suyin. I love your little bit of an accent.
A big accent.
No. It has always sounded very cute to me, the accent of the Aussies and the Kiwis. Okay, so what were the respective USPs of Buffalo Tours and Olympus Tours, and how do you consolidate companies with backgrounds which seemingly were quite different from each other?
Yeah, the USPs of the two companies were actually very similar. It was founded on sort of warm hospitality, service excellence, a very, very strong focus on the customer, health and safety, as well as destination expertise. So the USPs were very similar. What was different were that the two companies had slightly different offerings. Buffalo Tours was very much an end-to-end DMC, which is really providing all services that were on the ground, from transport to accommodation to tours, not just day tours, but multi-day touring. Olympus, on the other hand, was more focused on transport, certainly, surface transport, and day tours and activities. So they were not really doing very much in terms of that multi-day experiential touring. Consolidation was actually an interesting challenge not least because of the culture and the language differences of the two companies. But what we found was the values of the two entities were fairly similar, which was this really strong service ethos, putting the customer front and center, and a very strong culture of family and community. So we sort of leveraged that in bringing the companies together. We needed to move on to a single platform. So this gave us the opportunity to allow our people from both businesses to form cross-functional groups to work together to put in this single platform. So it gave the opportunity for them to understand each other, understand each other's businesses, and I think just get to know each other a little bit better. So that's really how we got there in the end.
How did you identify the other company on the other side of the world?
It was really a business that the Flight Centre Travel Group in the USA used as a DMC for these destinations, Mexico, Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica. So that's how they came on our radar, and we decided that we could really acquire this company and really take it to the next level. Okay. So that's how it came about.
And how has it developed in the meantime? How many branches do you have now in the world under the Discova branch?
So since acquisition, we haven't really expanded our footprint. That's going to be our next phase. So we've really kept the 11 markets in Asia and 3 markets in the Americas. So we haven't expanded the footprint. What we have done with the Americas business is to start pivoting them into a full-service DMC. So really now creating and designing products that are around multi-day touring, creating more immersive experiences, operating more of our products, particularly in Mexico, to be able to deliver a different experience. Okay.
You said in an interview that I heard recently, I think it was on on TTG. We
Oh,
say
dear.
hello to our friend Karen. That one of the main objectives of Discova was to shake the business of destination management. Can you elaborate?
I hope that wasn't one of the copies that my marketing department wrote. But no, that's a good question. I think when you look at the DMCs, it's a fairly competitive sector. And when you take away, you look at all their websites, you take away the brands, the logos, what you're left with is very inspiring itineraries, beautiful imagery. Everyone talks about, the personal service, in-destination expertise, local and authentic experiences. So I think not much really at face differentiates the DMCs besides really the customer segments that you might service, maybe specific sector specialization or price. So I think we haven't always come from, certainly Flight Centre Travel Group hasn't really been an operational business. We've had a very, very strong sales agency background. And I think as a result of that, we have a lot of focus on supply and distribution, a lot of interesting models that we have created over the years and have been very successful for us. So I think our challenge at Discover is now to be able to leverage the core capabilities, the know-how of the global parent, but really balance that with that in-destination expertise, that warmth, the hospitality, the operational excellence to deliver a better experience for partners. I mean, we have come from that space. So we truly understand what our partners are looking for in terms of their growth strategies, their brand DNA, the customer experience that they're looking for. So I hope that Discover can really take that and have a greater understanding of what our partners are trying to achieve and become very flexible in delivering what they need from a product and a service perspective, from partnership models and commercial offerings to even the types of services that may not traditionally be offered by a DMC. So that's where we hope to be a little bit more disruptive, is having that flexibility and creativity to create something that is unique for that partnership, as opposed to being stuck by that conventional wisdom that, DMCs don't do this. This is not something that is part of a DMC's responsibility. So we want to break those boundaries a little bit and be able to really look at every partnership as strategic. What does that partner want? And as long as there is aligned goals and aligned values, we are really willing to invest in that partnership for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Aside from reinventing the model of the destination management company, have you perhaps identified some ills in the tourism and travel industry recently that you have been willing to address, perhaps through the creation of Discova?
Yeah, I mean, where do you start? Mass tourism, obviously, in Asia is a huge problem. We see that in some of our destinations, Phuket, in Siem Reap. And really, that mass tourism is not really helping the local communities that should be benefiting from tourism. You look at environmental impact, single-use plastics, pollution, animal welfare practices, and last but not least, you look at social impact around the exploitation potentially of marginalized communities. So you look at sex tourism in Asia, you look at child exploitation or commercialization of orphanages and the impact on children.
Are you saying that orphanages are commercialized as a
Some
tourism commodity?
Some are certainly.
In what sense?
In the sense that, it's been quite well documented. Not a lot of orphanages actually have children who are orphans. So perhaps impoverished families have basically sold their children to orphanages so that it can create what we call orphanage tourism. People are going there, they're attracting donor funds. Those funds aren't actually going back to help the children or to help the local communities. It's really a commercial enterprise. So as a result, Discover doesn't do any orphanage tourism. We help in other ways, but certainly not from a tourist perspective. So yeah, I think we are seeing, all the negative impacts of tourism, which we hope to address through just the way we do things in a more sustainable way, educating our partners in other ways of traveling, not just being attracted to those really, really busy urban destinations, but looking at second-tier and third-tier destinations, which might be just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, but to encourage them to be able to expand their programs to communities or areas that might really need that tourism.
Do you rely on local partners? I mean, of course, your staff members. Do you train them to these notions? How does it work? Because I suppose it doesn't come just like that.
No, I mean the concept of responsible travel has always been in Buffalo Tours' DNA, and I think largely because our staff are 95% local. So they've come from the communities where we operate. So a lot of the ideas or the initiatives are really coming about from our people. They're bringing these issues to us. They're bringing community needs to us. And then we really look at it holistically to see, how can we really help these communities in a sustainable way? Can we create community-based tourism experiences? Could we create projects that might help, these communities have better infrastructure, better healthcare, better education? So really a lot of it is brought to us by our people. And I think that's where Discover's a little bit different. We really hire, train, empower, and value local staff. There is no them and us. We have a hugely egalitarian culture, very inclusive. So our local people have a very strong voice in our organization. And I think as a result, we really can see their contribution in helping us develop the sustainable initiatives in our business.
So it's a grassroots approach.
It's very much a grassroots. It's very organic, yeah.
That's very interesting because a lot of these companies seem to employ guides who are trained to, go places with tourists. But I in the course of my travels, I've used some of these people. They were not always machines who were replicating the same thing all the time. Yes, more often than not, there was a human interaction. They were sensible people. They had things to say, etc. But I never had the sense that their organization was really empowering them to actually convey some messages and to also feed back to their organization what could be done better, differently, and where they could explore areas of novelty in a way. And so I like your approach. I think it's the way to go.
Yeah. And I think it's important to think of guides not as guides, but as hosts of their destination.
That's a good word. Host.
Hosts. It really changes the mindset of how we look at these people who really, some of them are with us for maybe 2-3 weeks, right, on the road. And so we want them to be able to treat us as family or friends who are visiting a destination and being hosted by these guides and their local communities. So that's what we encourage. And we have a very strong guide academy and guide management program. So we try not to script everything to the nth degree. Obviously, we have certain product frameworks. You need to tick certain things. But we give our guides a fair bit of autonomy to really be able to showcase their homes in the best possible way, to tell the stories. You're right, human interactions is what really tourism or meaningful tourism is about. And so how can we get these hosts to be able to share the stories and really, I think that's the heart and soul of a place is always through its people. Not necessarily that, yes, this was a great place, a beautiful place that we visited, but it's truly through the people that you have this meaningful connection with the destination. And if you look at any of the reviews on TripAdvisor or, through our feedback management system, I don't think any guest really says, gosh, that hotel was so amazing. That really made my trip. It's always about the guides. It's always about the human element
About
of
the
that
host.
trip. The host that has that really makes it memorable for our guests, which ultimately is what they write about in most of their reviews.
I agree. That's what I do too.
Never have you said, gosh, that was a great satay.
Yeah.
Well, it may well have been, but it was not the hero
Well, then
of
the
your
satay
trip.
has to be supremely exceptional.
It might have been supremely exceptional.
Okay. Where does your personal inclination towards sustainable tourism, if we want to use this overused word today, come from? What clicked in you initially that made you want to use your career and the opportunity of your power as a businesswoman with a lot of people under her? How did it happen to you?
I've been in the Flight Centre Travel Group for 21 years. So because of that amazing career, I've been able to travel widely across the world, and I've been very fortunate to do that. I think in my travels, you see some phenomenal places, but the trips that always resonate with you are those where you don't have a set itinerary, you rent a car, you just drive through towns and villages, and you use sign language because you can't speak. No one else can speak English. You can't read the menu, so you point and you hope for the best. And I think that sort of wanderlust or that element of discovery, I think, is how I've always loved to travel. And even when I've had a host or a guide, we've always focused on what they wanted to show us as opposed to I must see this destination. So I think that's always been in my blood, I think, and appreciating beautiful places, the local cultures, and not always going to a place to go, you know what, I must have pizza tonight, or unless I'm in Italy. So I think really there was no sort of epiphany about sustainability. I think you just wanted to make sure that other people could see what you're seeing and enjoy the experience. I mean, I dislike overcrowding intensely. So I think any destination that is so overcrowded really takes the joy and beauty out of it. So I just want to make sure that we create experiences that we ourselves have enjoyed, you know. But Buffalo Tours have always had responsible travel in its DNA. So when I joined the company, it was more, I guess it was a greater focus for me to actually do something about it. You know, my mentor at the time, Graham Harper, who's now the Director of Sustainability at Parta. You know, Gray Harper always challenged me to learn more, to seek a deeper understanding, because quite often it's emotive. We'll read something on social media, gosh, we've got to do something about it. 99% of the time it's misdirected action, well intended, but still misdirected. And so Gray really just challenged me to learn more and to ask more questions. And then that was really sort of bit of a turning point for me, instead of just having a passing interest, to actually take more action.
A technical question for you, Suyin. You said in an interview in a PATA webinar, if I remember well, that you felt that the COVID-19 crisis had revealed that destination management companies were more and more on the B2C segment as opposed to the B2B segment. So it's been one and a half years since we haven't really seen confirmations or information of what you've said, because by definition, none of these companies have operated that much, obviously. But reconsidering this statement, do you feel that it's correct? And could you explain why it's a problem, and why it should be more B2B from the viewpoint of Discova?
I think when you are in such a competitive sector as a DMC, it's always tempting to widen your reach with B2C. If you look at all our websites, you know, they're very inspirational. They speak as much to the B2C customer as they do to the B2B customer. So naturally, you're going to have people wander onto your website, make inquiries about travel. And I think we've seen a lot of our competitors, and Buffalo Tours included back then, we would take that inquiry and service consumers directly. I think, though, to really make that a success, it requires so much time and investment, as you know, in the B2C sector, that you spend so much effort getting your brand in front of the customer and on sales and marketing. And then you really lose sight of what you're really here to do, which is create a better experience for your B2B partners. And I think, so for us, we made that decision when we rebranded to Discover to completely exit the B2C segment. And it was, to be honest, not an insignificant part of our business at the time, but it was a choice that we made. And we didn't want to alienate our B2B partners by competing for the very same customers that they were. And we then refocused our efforts on being the best B2B partners that we could be. As what I said, looking at product design, really trying to understand their needs, their brand DNAs, trying to be an extension of that partner on the ground. How can we help them grow their business? And ultimately, they are already in that B2C space. So working through them.
Who is it?
The partners, our B2B partners.
Okay.
Yeah. So ultimately, we're still getting the reach and the scale that we need by partnering with service providers who are already in that B2C space. And it's really competitive. So in the current context, it would still cost a lot of money to be able to acquire those B2C customers. It's not our game, and I don't think that we have the resources necessarily to pivot to that segment. And I think our partners appreciate that instead our time and effort and even some investment is really put into helping our B2B partners stand their businesses back up. How can we get them selling as quickly as possible? Because that's really for our mutual benefit at the end of the day.
So what's the difference in the model that Discova is championing currently? With that of the more general and I would say very established players such as Kony or Tumlare or Mickey Travel. Can you explain a bit further? Because I think it will be an interesting response.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said before, I think a lot of the DMCs do very similar things. It could be just an area of specialization, for example, adventure travel or MICE, as in the case of Mickey and Kony. It could be just their geographical footprint and the different destination expertise, depending on where they're operating. But I think what's different if you look at Kony and Mickey is that they're very focused on distributing their suppliers' products to their partners. And a lot of those suppliers they're third-party suppliers, So they act as a bit of an aggregator to be able to surface their suppliers' products to their partners. At Discover, we take a more organic approach. Fundamentally, our purpose is about connecting people and places with a world of possibilities. By definition, we are focused on that experience between the host and the visitor. It's about creating those immersive experiences that really brings about meaningful travel. So we don't outsource a lot of our operations. We try to operate wherever we can, our products on the ground. So that gives us incredible flexibility and I guess creativity to deliver those unique experiences or products that certain partners need. And I think that also helps us not just have greater control over the customer experience, but we also have greater influence over the impact of tourism on our destinations and where those tourism dollars go. And I think for us, that's important. Like I say, a lot of our people are local. They've come from these communities where we operate. So it's in all our best interests to be able to develop experiences that can really help these local communities.
You're giving me a cue for a question that I've been dying to ask you. I think it's a very fashionable question at the moment. Do you find that practices in tourism will change in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis? Will there finally be room for quality and content, which means a focus on a more experiential approach to travel that includes all the local stakeholders? Or will we go back desperately seeking the cheap price, which means streamlining a limited range of services and not including the the local stakeholders? What can you predict?
Oh, that's such a tough question. I think it's very difficult for operators who have created models and relied on models that depend on mass consumption and mass tourism to really change the way they do it unless there is a re-education process or a compelling reason to change the way that you do things, i.e. government intervention.
We're going to come to that later.
Yeah. So, however, I do think, though, there's a couple of things that give me optimism. One is sustainability, and I think platforms like this are important, has been getting more and more of a voice. And I think there has been a trend towards sustainable travel. This new generation of travelers really care about the planet and they care about social issues impacting the planet. So they may seek out those experiences that lend itself to that conversation. Secondly, I think because of the pandemic, certainly in the next 2 years, there's not going to be the same volume of travelers, I don't think. I know there's a lot of talk about pent-up demand, but the fact is you're likely going to have to be vaccinated to travel. And then the consumer is also very worried now about health and safety, social distancing, taking private tours versus seat and coach tours. They're looking to travel just with family and friends as opposed to just strangers.
This will have, it will force many operators to reconsider their model.
Yes, to be
Because
able
how
to be
can
relevant.
they create a margin
And then I
with
think
less people?
True, exactly. And look, ultimately, there's a view that travel is just going to cost more. Maybe so, right? But it is not about, the frequency of traveling. Perhaps we travel less. I remember in my 20s and 30s, you had to save up a long time to be able to take an overseas trip. You didn't just jump on a plane and go somewhere, but you really savored it because you worked hard to be able to do that. So I don't think it's about, excluding people from traveling. I just think it's about quality consumption rather than overconsumption. And I think, but we may not have a choice. I'm hoping that we are really going to have to create these experiences because that's a demand factor, right? Customers are going to want better health and safety, better experiences, less crowded destinations, different types of travel, maybe fly drive holidays. So by virtue of that, I think, operators will have to step up and create those experiences.
So you believe in the virtuous cycle?
I do a little, yes, but I still have, this niggling voice in my ear that, I still believe that governance and government intervention and support is still going to be required to a certain extent to bring about wholesale change.
Do you feel that this is something that is lacking in Asia, for example? Of course, what is Asia? Asia can be Australia, it can be Cambodia, so we can't really compare. But what's your take on that? Has there been one government in particular which has inspired you because they've been doing the right thing for a longer time?
Yeah, I think it's just lack of governance. If you look at NTOs and this flawed thinking that the more and more visitors that we have is going to help our economy. Realistically, maybe so 95%. Bottom line figures. But actually not a big chunk of that revenue actually doesn't stay in the local economy. As you know, it might be going to foreign-owned and operated businesses. It goes into a few limited hands who really profit from tourism.
Is there an example that you would like to share?
I think if you look at where the revenues from all the temple entrance fees go to in Siem Reap, you'd be very surprised about where that goes.
I don't know anything about that. Please explain.
So it does go to certain individuals or certain organizations that are affiliated with the government or the ruling party of the day that really collects a lot of that revenue. It really doesn't go back to the local communities. So when you have that, the very people that it's meant to benefit are not benefiting. I think where we have seen the lack of governance really destroy a destination is Boracay in the Philippines.
Oh, yes.
So you could see that, the president went there and decided to shut down a destination for 6 months because he said it was a cesspool. And so it was really around kicking out all those illegal operators, knocking down illegal infrastructure, and bringing strong governance back. But to make that happen, Philippines had to invest a great deal of money to rehabilitate that destination because they literally shut it down for more than 6 months. And it really required collaboration of multiple government agencies and private sector to be able to restore, the marine and the coastal ecosystem, to be able to create new infrastructure, proper waste management systems and processes, and then to police that. But, as a result, Boracay has come back, certainly with less people, a much lower carrying capacity than it used to have, but it's better yield for the operators that are in that destination.
How did it happen in the first place? How did Boracay become so overcrowded?
It was just
It's
promoted.
a small place, for God's sake.
Yeah, it was a small place, but it was very well marketed, and there was literally a lot of unauthorized development. So people were getting were able to get around the building codes and the regulations by perhaps paying incentives to be able to get their structures. And so it was just very, very well marketed. And it just became known, I guess, as this great seaside coastal resort. And it was, yeah.
So you're saying that more and more people went there?
More and more people went there, which then attracted more and more foreign operators who were then taking groups there. And then they were starting hotels and all sorts of restaurants and not having proper waste management, or, sewage was being pumped directly into the ocean. So it was just people turning a blind eye because they were paid to turn a blind eye, And it wasn't until, I guess, Duterte went there and visited the destination, like he grew up there, and looked at it and just went, this is disgusting. We're going to shut it down, But that took, they poured billions of pesos into new infrastructure and not to mention that whole destination had no revenue for a long time.
Yes, of course.
However, the silver lining, I guess, is that, Philippines now understand that, well, they spend a lot of money to rebrand that destination as a sustainable destination. I think they can feel that this is a model that they can create a competitive advantage in a very crowded, ASEAN market. So, and they're planning to do that with more destinations in the Philippines, and to really be able to put Philippines up as a sustainable country, a sustainable destination for travelers.
Are you guys able, as a destination management company who's well implanted in those environments, do you feel that you guys have a power to feedback perhaps best practices and advices to the local government so that more of these regulations are amended and changed for the better, that the fiscal policy is adapted in a better manner to deter those cheap operators, and on the contrary, encourage those who are more sustainable? Do you feel that you have a power on that front?
Not a huge power. I think a collective voice is always more powerful than a single voice. And so it depends on the destination, how well organized the industry is. For example, how collaborative are the operators in an industry? Typically they're fragmented, and it is very difficult to be pushing forward an approach when no one else around you really cares. But, you are seeing in certain destination where there is more kind of, I call it co-opetition, between like-minded operators and putting together, a stronger voice to pitch to governments and so forth. But it's slow going, I must admit. And I think you do need sort of that trans sector conversations and how to bring academia, public sector, private sector, and the local community to the table. It really is difficult at bigger destinations. Maybe at a smaller scale in certain provinces or villages, you might have a better chance.
So on this, you were talking about Boracay. I think it's a very good example. We could have talked about Koh Phi Phi, about
Koh Phangan. It's another one that
there are plenty of those, right? Or maybe Santorini in Greece or places like that.
Yeah,
I think we all know about these places which have been hot in the tourism discussions.
Well, I think the other thing, sorry, Benoit, the other thing that we're starting to see, and perhaps it might have a strong voice as well at the table, is citizen activism, right? So you've seen that in Europe, Barcelona, Venice, Paris, where the citizens are protesting because we can't live in our own city. It's become untenable. And so perhaps that also is now another voice at the table. And, politicians always like to know what the voters are saying.
That's certainly a voice that we want to promote.
Yes.
Because we when we started this project with my friend Jihang, we actually wanted to give a voice to those who usually do not have one. And in the first place, these people are citizens. They might be also tourism or travel professionals, such as you. Some of them are not. Some of them are professors. We even had a musician. I don't know. But the point is to actually give a voice to these people who, I believe, when they unite together, when there are many of them at the same time saying the same thing, will have an impact on governments, who all of a sudden will start listening. Yeah. And I think nothing can happen without a government at the end of the day.
It cannot.
Right?
I really believe that. And sometimes the governments take a fair bit of convincing. I'll give you an example. We have a project in Manggis in Bali. So that's an organic farm-to-table project. So previously in Manggis village, they farm. But basically rice crops is by and large. The irrigation channel broke down during a flood and they really were stuck. The farmers didn't have a means of creating a new crop. So someone came to us again and said, how could we help in this space? Now, there was very little local government support for this project. So we really just kicked it off with different stakeholders. And now we built some momentum. We helped those farmers get their produce ready for sale. So we really utilize our supply chain to create standing orders for this new organic rice crop. But it wasn't until that really sort of took hold that did local government take note. That, hey, there's something interesting happening here. And then they started to get engaged and now thinking about how they could replicate this in other villages. Now, would they have done that 6 months ago? No. But, now they can see what is going on and that's a great outcome, the fact that they can.
Would you say that it's a good example of what we call regenerative travel?
Yes, I think, and it's a tough one, that's a very, very high standard, regenerative
we have
travel.
To start with something.
I know, it's very high. However, I think, yes, the lands are now better farmed because it's organic. The farmers are actually involving more and more of the community, especially the women. We partnered with a local NGO who are advocates of female empowerment. And historically, traditionally, women were never involved in the farming activities. Now the women are really getting involved, not in farming crops, but really working with our hotels to go, what sort of organic herbs and vegetables might the hotels be interested in? And so the women have now taken their own workshops to be able to grow these amazing herbs and vegetables, which now the hotels previously had air flown in, but now they're able to source locally. So yeah, definitely in that village, if the definition of regenerative tourism is to leave the place better than you found it, I think, one could argue in our own small way, we have achieved that and are still achieving it.
This is very inspiring. How do you find the people who will give you this idea, who will introduce the project? You're talking about something very specific. It's like a needle point on the map of Bali. How did you get to know about them? Who fed you back?
So we wanted to create, because of other work that we do in other villages in Indochina, we wanted to see if we could create a farm to table concept. So we just put it out to our local teams, our Balinese team, to go, this is what we're trying to do. Surely that there must be a village who would be really interested in participating in such a project, or willing to convert their farmland into doing organic farming that could be then utilized by our supply chain.
So they went out and scooted for you.
So this, yes, a little bit, and also, so some of our staff came from that Manggis community. So that's how we really got wind of that. And that's really how we get most of our ideas or how these projects are sourced. It's truly from our people on the ground. And they've brought sort of, and it was great because these people really put the whole project together, and they have such huge commitment now and ownership of this project. So it runs by itself. Hopefully we can see the crop this month, the first rice crop, which is going to a lot of the hotels that are suppliers of Discovers.
You must be delighted.
It is. It's exciting. I'll be more delighted when I can go there for a cooking class and have lunch at this village.
We'll go with you.
Yeah. So that is the next level then, is how do we now take, develop other experiences where travelers can really go and experience that authenticity.
That makes me want to ask you, could you share a few beautiful stories, encounters that you've made in the course of your travels that have led to creating a partnership, identifying these people, empowering them, and making them a local partner? There are many people who are awesome out there. Everybody who travels with the same kind of culture knows that. I've seen a lot of inspiring people on the website of Discova when I discovered it, and you put them, you highlight them quite well. I really appreciated that. Can you share a few awesome stories?
Yeah. Oh, good goodness. You meet so many incredible people, but my passion, and I think it's also one of Discover's core passion, is education. So I do believe that lack of education is the root of all evil, and I met this lovely girl, she was mid-20s, but she was a mum of two. She was at a tailor in Hoi An. Incredibly talented, and she was telling me about her job. She works really long hours. She gets 2 days a month off to spend with her boys. And I said, well, how did you come to become a seamstress in Hoi An? Like, what were you doing? So typical story, they came from a farming community. She didn't finish school, left the farm because it was too hard and wanted to get a better life in the city. And she was ever so grateful that she had this good job rather than perhaps falling to the less reputable profession. But it struck me that she was so smart, Benoit, and what she lacked was a good education and what she could have achieved with a great education. So we've always supported education as one of our core pillars. And out of that, funnily enough, in Bali, Peter Christensen, our GM there, also saw an opportunity to create a guide academy. So if you look in Bali and Phuket to a certain extent, a lot of the guides have been there a long time. They were lacking that passion, that enthusiasm. They were just going through the motions of guiding and just going, this is the destination. And we lost that hospitality. And we were never going to get it back because these guides had been in the trade for
They're
so
worn
long.
out.
They were really worn out. So we decided to, and just by chance, Peter met this professor, a semi-retired professor in travel and tourism. So they got together and put together a curriculum for guides, and we invited kids from marginalized community, like young kids who wanted to build a career in travel, to interview, to really come down and apply for positions in our guide academy. And it sounds a little bit more than that, because not only do you have to pay for the education, you have to give the families an allowance because these kids are no longer able to work in those communities. So you have to be able to still provide that livelihood to their families while these kids were going through their course. But we're really happy that, we've got 52 graduates now from this program. And you talk to some of them on our website, you would have seen some of them featured. Some of them are truly the best guides that we have in Bali now. Time and time again, compared to the more experienced guides, they're chosen from a blind selection by our tour operator partners who have chosen a lot of them to guide their tours over more experienced guides. So I think for us, we also work with people like Jimmy Pham from Koto in Vietnam, who is an Australian Vietnamese who started a hospitality school for marginalized street kids in Vietnam. So again, his values resonate with ours, his purpose resonates with ours. And so in those situations, we do partner with local partners to really drive traffic into those enterprises.
So tourism can be a very positive catalyst. It's not only a wishful thinking. I think you're demonstrating that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I mean, just in 2019 alone, and it's in our small way, we don't believe in charity. I think it's about the empowerment of local communities. And so in 2019, through the programs that we have, our community-based tourism programs, our community projects that we have, I think we probably put in about $1.5 million directly back to the communities from our tourism revenue, right? And that is not because they were donor funds. That was just the work that we have done with these villages to create, the training that we put in to be able to create hospitality experiences that really suit the needs of our partners.
That's a better way to count the GDP
growth
than to burn gasoline or to...
Absolutely. And I think it's so easy. It's so easy to I guess, and look, and I'm not criticizing other models. This is just a model that works for us. But there's many models where you would just hand over a chunk of cash to a local organization or an NGO and then, support them in doing what they do. We just felt that by doing this, we just had greater influence and control and greater visibility of what that money was being used for.
Do you feel that the big guys in those territories, we were talking about Bali, Phuket, the big brands, for example, the big tourism chains, for example, do you feel that they also have taken this approach and that they are trying their best to implement at their level? Obviously, they can't be compared with you can't be compared with them. Do you feel that they are doing enough? Do you feel that the last 1.5 years of idled tourism has awakened any of them? All of them? None of them? Have you seen things?
I think the global chains that have the investment capacity have always, to a certain extent, had been advocates of sustainability. You look at Six Senses, you look at even all the Accords and so forth. They do have sustainability as a core pillar for what they do. Even Cross Hotels and Resorts, our sister brand, has always had sustainability. So in terms of power management, waste management, recycling, use of single-use plastics and so forth. So I think properties or operators who were that way inclined will always continue to do that and to improve on that. What concerns me are probably the small independents and owner-operated properties, right? So a lot of them have had to shut down the hotels for 14 months now, So when they come back, is sustainability going to be the number one focus? No. It's just, how do I stand my hotel back up so that I can start collecting revenue? So again, that sector is difficult, without government intervention to go, this is the way you have to do it. It is tough. So I think it's very fragmented, the approach. But by and large, I think the large global players are already on that path to better sustainable practices.
So that makes me want to ask you a question that I've asked to my previous guest about the idea of a pure travel, not based on consumption and mass tourism. In the current context, where travel has been instrumentalized to create revenue, basically, how do we press the reset button? How do we make that industry more virtuous? What's your perspective on that?
Well, if there's ever a good time for it, it's now, because one of the key concerns was, what if all these people get put out of work because you may not be able to pivot, but people are already out of work. We've lost a lot of talent in our industry to other sectors, So I think hopefully whoever's still standing by the end of this, as we start to recover, are going to be those operators who have the means and who have this vision, perhaps, who share this aspiration for sustainability, and they can stand up and kind of lead the way. And we can also then afford to, bring back the best. We downsize our workforce by 60, 70%. But when we come back, we will absolutely bring the best people back into our industry, into our business. So I do think that there is an opportunity to reset. Depends on, again, it depends on whether there's enough people who want to do it or who are compelled to do it. Ultimately, I don't believe that we could just sort of say, well, can we go back to the way it is, shopping tours, zero margins. I don't think operators can afford to do that, Benoit. There's no money.
So then that's good news.
That is good news. I do believe that for a lot of operators, they won't be able to do that because they haven't had income for 14 months. Mm-hmm. So how can you continue to operate? I think there's just going to be fewer operators initially. And I think this is the opportunity for those operators who can stand up to be able to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, so that makes me want to ask you something about price, about... You were talking about no margins businesses. I was actually shocked a few years ago that to learn that the government of China had actually banned those practices. I didn't know that they were existing in the first place. They actually had to ban operators from operating without a margin, which I was totally flabbergasted when I heard that. So it was a wake-up call for me, and I realized that more of more countries actually are still using these practices today, which basically consists in killing the small fish, because we're a big fish. We can sustain no margins for a longer time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we are owned by the government, and we kill the small fish. I mean, it's horrible because you actually end up with a model which is oligarchic or monopolistic.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is not what we want. We want pluralism. That's
and ultimately, the customers, the tour groups that go on these tours, they don't enjoy that experience either, having to be dragged to 50 shops, being pressured to buy things, because that's really how that operator is earning any revenue from it. So it's a bad experience, but people get attracted by this, go to XYZ for $10.
Yeah. Cheap is often a drive, I think, for human beings all over the planet. It's not only here in Asia.
And it's not just travel, Benoit. It's across every category, right? Like food is the same, right? Yeah. Like really, there's some very, very bad practices of mass consumption in food and beverage.
It's true. That reminds me of a saying that my former CEO, who I say hello to, Bernard Lambert, he used to tell me, Benoit, when something is cheap, it's not worth a lot by definition, because you need to spend money on craftsmanship, on know-how, on material, whether it be physical or intellectual, to be able to create a great product, be it a physical product or an experience.
But
I
you
believe
have
in
to
that.
value it, right? You have to value that craftsmanship. You have to understand the story behind how that product or service was created. If you're just looking at it like, really? That's why people buy fake handbags, right? Because it's just the status. It's about the consumption of that item as opposed to what has happened to get this item to this point, you know. But
at the same time, don't you think that it should be a deterrent to approach customers with the idea that they actually have to pay the price for a better travel?
yeah, but I think you would find that if the traveler cared about those things, they cared about a better experience rather than a cheap experience. And it depends on why they're going, right? But you know, I think they would pay. It's like organic food, right? And like organic food, even after all these years, is still as expensive as it ever was before.
But it has reduced a little bit comparatively to 10
A
years.
little bit.
It's a mass thing precisely because you're able to produce
Correct.
more,
Produce
of
more,
that
we
good
get-
food, and then it diminishes the price slightly.
Exactly. But, you know, this movement for organic has taken a very long time. You know, it's not a new concept. But people who really appreciate what that does for you will pay it, right? So I'm not going to consume more. I'm going to consume less, but I consume better quality.
But it's also about what it gives to the environment, whether it be nature or society. I think it's a holistic concept. You know, if you realize that if you buy that food, not only is it good for you because you have no additives, no chemicals in that food, but it's also a better model for the planet. I think it translates right across the board in many industries.
But it's education and awareness,
Yeah.
right? If you don't know what you don't know, like me, for years and years and years, I ate battery cage hens' eggs. Like you didn't know that, you know, eggs just came in a box in a supermarket, right? So until that awareness was created and people were more educated, and I think that's our job in travel is to understand that sustainable travel, it's not a destination, it's just this journey that we're on. And as much as we can to educate and educate and educate, that's our contribution, I think.
That's our job,
Yes,
and
and
hopefully
your
our
job.
contribution at the Chorus podcast as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So one of the trendy subjects at the moment is digitalization. What is your take on digitalization? Is it a response to sustainable and responsible travel? What do you think about that? Are there limitations? Is it an over-inflated concept?
Okay. So by digitalization, I'm assuming you're talking about virtual experiences.
Yeah, virtual experiences, but also all these tools online which help you supposedly. No, actually, that's what it says. That it helps you consume more responsibly. But does it?
I think, look, if we talk about digitalization in terms of virtual experiences, I think it really, in the corporate travel space, absolutely, right? I think corporates now are finding that we can work anywhere in the world. We can bring people together. And really, it's not, we don't really need to jump on a plane every 10 seconds. But I think in the leisure space, I think digitalization has its role to play in research, in inspiring you to look at a destination, to think about a different way of traveling. But the problem with, and I see a lot of people are marketing virtual tours, and because they have to at the moment, right? But ultimately, in leisure, why do we go somewhere? It's because of the human connections. It's about that element of discovery. It's those emotions that you feel. And I think with virtual tours, you lose 3 out of the 5 senses, right? Which is smell, taste, and touch. So pretty hard to replicate that. As beautiful as that screen is, it's pretty hard to replicate that when you're traveling for leisure and for discovery.
I think I agree with you.
How could you can look at something beautiful. You can look at a great spring roll in Vietnam, but you can't taste it.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
you look at a great curry, you can't smell it, you know. So it makes those virtual experiences very tough for us to evoke the same human response to them.
Don't you find that digitalization is also a way to save the bottom line, to create new margins of profit that we cannot make anymore?
It is. It is. Well, I think it does have one good thing about these virtual tours and digitalization. It still keeps your brand in the consumer's mind, so that when it does come back, your brand isn't forgotten. So I think it is a good tool for a lot of operators to help keep you at the forefront, so that when you travel again, you're going to think Discover, or you're going to think Coney, or you're going to think,
But that was already there before the COVID era. I mean, everybody had a website. Everybody was putting virtual tours or short movies. Also in China, on Weibo, WeChat, a lot of tourism operators were doing that as well. TripAdvisor has been doing that for years. Expedia has been doing that for years. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, when I was looking at that previously, you're right, but it was sort of snippets of content, right? Like little teasers. But now what we're seeing is full experiences being put, because there's just no other way to convey and also to charge. So before, that video content wasn't monetized, right, necessarily. It was just really a way to promote what you did. Now people are trying to monetize virtual tours because they need to.
Yeah, and that's absolutely understandable. I have myself supported some operators because I believe that they need to be supported at this moment. So it's a temporary thing, really, because as soon as we can, people will be back on track with their normal lives, which requires to meet people, smell fragrances, touch fabrics, and feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. Yeah. Sure. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of our session. We like to finish with something that will inspire the young generation of a travel and tourism professional. What advice would you have for the young generation? Is there anything that you would like to convey so that they don't give up on their dream to do that job? I mean, arguably at the moment, the outlook doesn't seem very positive. But how do you make them, push on through and become what they wanted to become in the tourism industry?
Travel's not going to go away. It's a mainstay, and I think, yes, we're going through a bit of a blip in time, but I think the young professionals, the young graduates who are entering our industry, they are the next generation. So all these issues that we're talking about today, the issues that they're aware of, I just encourage them to be that catalyst for change, because they're going to have more ideas, they're going to have more resources at their fingertips to be able to make a difference. So if they want to see greater sustainability, and thank goodness they do care a lot about the planet and the social issues that impacts all of us. So for me, they have this opportunity to make a difference and to build that next generation of travel in a much better way than we have, and perhaps fix some of the problems that we've created in our generation.
They grew with that knowledge.
Yes.
You were saying something very right just a few minutes ago. You were saying we didn't know, we were not educated about it. I think that these young people are educated. You can see how they actually reflect this education by choosing those slogans and addressing the problems that touch the whole world in those youth demonstrations. Australia has seen seen big ones last year.
For
example,
do.
Yeah.
And I love that activism. I like that they are taking action rather than sitting there and complaining about something, And that's one thing I really noticed. My nieces are late teens, early 20s, and they do just get up. If they see a problem, they don't just complain about it. Oh, I'm going to do something about it. So I said, great. If you don't like something, do something about it.
Well, That concludes beautifully our interview. Thank you very much, Suyin.
Thank you for having me. It was a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.